James Whittaker's alarm buzzed at 5:45 a.m., piercing through the quiet hum of his meticulously organized apartment. He rubbed his eyes, already half dreading the emails, meetings, and endless spreadsheets that awaited him at Whittaker Solutions. At 62, he had achieved everything the world respected: a thriving business, a reputation for integrity, and a lifestyle most people only dreamed of. Yet the victory felt hollow in the silence before dawn. Coffee in hand, he stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city slowly waking below, thinking about how long it had been since he had spent an unhurried morning with his daughter. Emma, now 32, bounced into the kitchen wearing a wide grin and a yoga outfit that screamed casual confidence. "Dad, you're still at it. You should retire, you know. Enjoy life a little," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee with effortless charm. There was no malice in her tone, only love wrapped in honesty. James forced a smile, feeling that familiar twinge of guilt. He had missed birthdays, recitals, quiet evenings, moments Emma never complained about, yet moments he missed all the same. He glanced around at the pristine kitchen, a testament to his obsessive attention to detail, and the framed family photos lining the counters. One captured him teaching Emma to ride a bike, her tiny hands gripping his as she wobbled down the driveway, her laughter piercing through the warm summer air. Another, years later, showed her graduation, her proud smile matching his own. The contrast between the memory and the present made his chest tighten. Work had been his priority for decades, and now, even in the rare moments of calm, he felt the weight of what he had sacrificed. Emma leaned against the counter, sipping her coffee, eyes sharp and inquisitive. "Seriously, Dad, life isn't just work, you've done enough." Her words landed like stones in a still pond. James chuckled softly, a wry mixture of pride and unease. She was right. He had done enough, yet the thought of stepping back seemed impossible, an identity he had built with relentless precision. The morning unfolded like any other, yet beneath the surface, tension lingered. There was love, yes, but also an unspoken challenge. Could he let go? Would retirement mean losing a part of himself, or gaining something he had never allowed himself to feel fully? The questions hovered, unanswered, as James dressed in his sharpest suit, the fabric crisp, the cufflinks gleaming, a uniform of control and mastery. As he stepped into the elevator, the city beyond the glass doors seemed both familiar and distant, a reminder of battles won and moments missed. Emma waved from the kitchen window, her silhouette small against the sunrise, her words echoing in his mind. Retirement, life, balance. The seeds of possibility had been planted, and James felt a spark, a restless curiosity he hadn't experienced in years. Today, he thought, might not be just another day. By the time he arrived at the office, the hum of activity surrounded him, yet something had shifted inside. The familiar rhythm of calls, emails, and negotiations was still there, but for the first time in decades, James's mind wandered beyond profit margins and client reports. He considered laughter, sunsets, spontaneous decisions, and strangely, the idea of surprising his daughter in a way she could never imagine. James Whittaker sank into his leather chair, the city skyline sprawled behind him like a painting of ambition and accomplishment. The office was quiet, save for the occasional ring of a phone or the soft tap of keys from his assistant, but Emma's words from that morning clung stubbornly to his mind. "You should retire, Dad. Enjoy life a little." She had said it casually, almost teasingly, yet something about the simplicity of her statement gnawed at him. He rubbed his temples, leaning back, humor and irritation tangled in equal measure. Retire? After 50 years of work, after building Whittaker Solutions from scratch, the thought felt both absurd and paradoxically seductive. He imagined a life where mornings weren't punctuated by meetings and deadlines, where coffee wasn't just a ritual but a companion to a long walk, a book, or even, he shuddered slightly, the occasional afternoon nap. "Life beyond work," he muttered under his breath, a ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. His gaze drifted to the framed photographs on his desk. Emma in her first day of kindergarten, Emma receiving her diploma, Emma laughing uncontrollably on a family vacation. The memories shimmered with warmth, yet they carried an unspoken sting, time lost to the relentless pursuit of success. He had been present in moments, yes, but always in fragments, always with one eye on the next report, the next client, the next victory. A sudden laugh echoed in his mind, Emma, vibrant and insistent. "Seriously, Dad, retirement isn't the end. It's a beginning. You don't have to vanish into spreadsheets forever." She had said it with the kind of playful confidence that could disarm even the most resolute executive. And yet, beneath the teasing, he sensed sincerity, a challenge wrapped in love. James's mind began to wander, exploring paths he had long dismissed. What if retirement didn't mean stepping back quietly? What if it was an opportunity to shake things up on his terms? The idea ignited something he hadn't felt in years: audacity. Not for power or recognition, but for a statement that would resonate both with himself and, more importantly, with Emma. He leaned forward, fingers steepled, picturing her expression if he did something unexpected, something bold, something that flipped the script entirely. The thought made his chest tighten, not with anxiety, but with an exhilarating pulse of possibility. He could retire, yes, but why fade quietly into the background when he could leave a mark that stunned and delighted simultaneously? And then it hit him, sudden and sharp, like lightning through a winter sky, her company. Emma had started a small consulting firm years ago, nurturing it with passion and vision. It was thriving, yes, but she was young, ambitious, and sometimes underestimated the weight of running her own enterprise. What if he bought it? Not to dominate, not to overshadow, but to make a statement, one that blended pride, challenge, and love in equal measure. He chuckled softly at the thought, a low, almost mischievous sound that had nothing to do with business calls or client victories. The idea was audacious, yes, unpredictable, certainly, but it carried a strange symmetry: a father, at the pinnacle of his career, stepping into his daughter's world not as a boss, not as a mentor, but as a partner and a force to be reckoned with. James closed his eyes, picturing the conversation. Her surprise, her laughter, the mild frustration that would inevitably follow, and beneath it all, the deeper connection that such a bold move might forge. It was reckless, impulsive, perhaps even foolish, but it was undeniably alive. And after decades of living cautiously, of measuring every decision against profit margins and societal expectations, he felt a thrill that no spreadsheet, no board meeting, and no accolade could ever match. By the time he opened his eyes, the office no longer felt like a cage of obligations. Instead, it was a launchpad for something new, unpredictable, and exhilarating. Emma's words echoed again, a challenge and a gift: enjoy life a little. And James Whittaker, ever the strategist, realized that perhaps this was the ultimate strategy, not for wealth, not for power, but for love, legacy, and the audacious joy of proving that even at 62, the game wasn't over. The spark had been lit. The plan, unformed but undeniable, began to take shape in his mind. Retirement was no longer a retreat. It was the prelude to an act that would change everything, for him and for Emma forever. That night, James lay awake, the ceiling above his bedroom dissolving into a mosaic of thoughts and possibilities. Streetlights filtered through the curtains, casting long, trembling shadows across the room, mirroring the uncertainty that gripped him. The audacity of the idea, buying Emma's company, refused to quiet itself. It was thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. What if it went horribly wrong? What if she resented him? Or worse, if he overstepped and fractured the delicate balance of love and respect they had painstakingly built? He turned onto his side, staring at the empty space beside him, remembering Emma's confident grin. He could almost hear her voice again, teasing, impatient, full of life. She believed in her work fiercely, and yet she had never seen him challenge her directly, never considered that her father might step into her world not as an observer, but as an active participant. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. How would she react if he walked into her office and presented her with a proposal she never expected? James's mind replayed scenes like a film director reviewing takes. Boardrooms bathed in fluorescent light, financial statements spread across polished tables, the quiet clatter of keyboards, and the soft murmur of staff wondering why their founder seemed suddenly uncharacteristically daring. He imagined her sitting there, eyebrows raised, a mix of shock and amusement in her gaze. Could he really pull this off without crushing her pride or appearing patronizing? Doubt gnawed at him, a persistent shadow beneath the thrill. Was it fair to insert himself into her business, to leverage years of experience and capital in a realm she had painstakingly cultivated on her own? And yet, the alternative, retiring quietly, fading into the background, felt sterile, hollow, like a story ending before the final chapter could be written. He had spent decades teaching lessons through action and example. Could this bold move be the ultimate lesson? A blend of audacity and generosity that spoke louder than any lecture or advice ever could. James rose from bed, drawn to the study where his laptop awaited, a silent accomplice to his nocturnal strategizing. He sketched preliminary calculations, market positions, and financial projections. Numbers danced across the screen, each figure a reminder that this was not merely a whimsical impulse. It required planning, precision, and timing. Yet even as he meticulously considered logistics, he could not suppress the human side of the plan, the emotional gamble, the potential for both joy and conflict. Sleep returned in fits and starts, fragmented by flashes of dialogue he might have with Emma. "Dad, what are you doing?" Or perhaps, "You can't be serious." He smiled at these imagined exchanges, tension and warmth interwoven. Each scenario held a cinematic quality, a narrative tension between rebellion and respect, ambition and affection. He realized that the thrill of the idea wasn't just about business, it was about connection, about creating a moment that neither of them would ever forget. By dawn, James had a clearer picture of the stakes and the potential consequences. His reflection in the mirror bore the lines of age, hard-won experience, and quiet resolve. The city below began to hum with life, yet he felt detached, suspended in a space between reality and possibility. This was no ordinary decision. It was a pivot, a challenge to the predictable, a deliberate act of audacity that carried both risk and reward. Finally, he exhaled, a long, deliberate release of tension. The doubts, fears, and excitement had formed a crucible in which clarity began to emerge. Emma's surprise, the office reactions, the moral tightrope of family dynamics, all of it coalesced into a single, irresistible drive. He would do it. Not impulsively, not recklessly, but deliberately, strategically, with the full weight of his experience and heart behind the move. The plan was not yet fully formed, the execution uncertain, but the spark had ignited into a controlled fire. James sat back, fingers intertwined, staring at the rising sun. A bold statement was coming, one that would redefine both his life and Emma's forever. James Whittaker sat at his oak desk, hands folded, the morning sunlight spilling across stacks of reports and financial statements. The office, usually a place of methodical calculation and quiet control, felt charged, almost electric, as if the walls themselves sensed the magnitude of the choice he was about to make. For decades, he had built his life around steady progression, careful planning, and incremental success. Today, none of that mattered. Today, he would leap. His mind raced, a storm of adrenaline and anticipation. The thought of buying Emma's company was audacious, reckless even, but thrilling. Pride surged through him, tempered by a flicker of fear. Could he actually pull this off without creating resentment or tension? The line between generosity and interference blurred in his mind, yet the excitement overshadowed caution. He pictured the moment she would hear the news. Her shock, the disbelief in her eyes, the spark of incredulity turning slowly into admiration. James ran his fingers over the polished surface of the desk, grounding himself in the tactile reality of decision-making. This wasn't a whim, it was a calculated act of audacity. Buying the company wasn't just a gesture, it was a statement. It was him proving, not to anyone else, but to himself, that age did not diminish courage, and legacy was as much about boldness as it was about achievement. Every late night, every deal closed, every battle fought in boardrooms across the city had led to this moment. He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes and letting memories wash over him. The countless hours spent building Whittaker Solutions, the painstaking attention to detail, the quiet sacrifices, The missed birthdays, the missed anniversaries, the moments lost to ambition, all of it converged in a single thought. It was time to write a new chapter, and this chapter would involve Emma in a way that no one could have anticipated. The audacity of the idea ignited a fire in his chest. He imagined her sitting across from him in her office, eyes wide, hands fidgeting over a mug of coffee, trying to process the unthinkable. Would she be amused, irritated, even angry, perhaps all of it at once? Yet beneath the storm of emotions, James felt an unmistakable pulse of joy, the joy of daring, of surprising, of connecting through a gesture so bold it could only come from a father who knew both love and strategy. He considered the practicalities, legal consultations, financial transfers, board approvals. Every step was daunting yet surmountable. He ran through scenarios in his head: resistance, negotiation, compromise, eventual acceptance. The thrill lay not only in the audacity, but in the meticulous orchestration of it. He had always thrived in complex challenges, and this was nothing less than a masterstroke of personal and professional daring. The contrast between his former quiet dedication and the audacity of this decision struck him. For decades, James had been careful, measured, predictable. Today, he was unpredictable, daring, almost reckless, but in a way that felt liberating rather than irresponsible. The weight of years pressed upon him, yet for the first time in decades, he felt the exhilaration of stepping beyond routine, beyond expectation. Finally, he reached for the phone, the tool that would turn thought into action. His hand trembled slightly, betraying the cocktail of fear, excitement, and pride coursing through him. This was more than a business decision. It was a declaration of legacy, of love, and of proof that boldness, even at 62, could redefine relationships and rewrite futures. With a deep breath, James pressed the speed dial to his financial advisor, the first step toward a move that would shock, challenge, and ultimately transform both his world and Emma's. James Whittaker arrived at Emma's office just past 9, the morning light catching on his silver cufflinks and perfectly pressed suit. His presence alone seemed to command attention. Employees paused mid-task, casting curious glances toward the glass-walled office at the corner of the building. The door opened before he could knock. "Dad," Emma's voice carried a mix of surprise and suspicion. She stepped aside, a notebook clutched loosely in her hand. "You're here early." James smiled, the kind of calm, confident smile that carried decades of experience. "Morning, Emma. I wanted to talk to you about something important." He held up a folder, neat and heavy with documents, every sheet meticulously prepared. "Shall we?" Emma's brow furrowed. She led him to her office, the room warm with sunlight, walls lined with books and awards she had earned on her own. She gestured for him to sit. "Okay, this sounds serious. Should I be worried?" James took a slow breath, savoring the moment. "No, not worried, surprised maybe." He placed the folder on her desk. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other morning." He paused, letting the words hang. Emma leaned forward, curiosity piqued. "You mean about retirement?" she asked cautiously. James nodded. "Exactly. I realized I don't want to step back quietly. I want to step into your world." He opened the folder, sliding papers across the polished surface. "I want to buy your company." Emma blinked, frozen mid-breath. "Wait, what?" Her eyes scanned the documents, disbelief etching every line of her face. "You're serious?" "I am," James said, leaning back, the confidence in his posture a stark contrast to the storm of emotions flashing across Emma's features. "I've consulted with lawyers, accountants, and strategists. Everything is in order. I'm making you an offer. Full control remains with you operationally, but legally, the company will be mine." Emma's mouth opened, closed, then opened again, as if searching for the right words in a language she didn't know. "Dad, this is insane. I mean, I appreciate it, but isn't this a little, I don't know, overwhelming?" James chuckled softly, the sound both soothing and commanding. "Perhaps, but consider it a vote of confidence. I believe in you and in the vision you've built. And yes, it's bold, but bold is sometimes what life needs." She stood abruptly, pacing the small office. You could have just retired. You didn't have to buy my company. I mean, people will talk. They'll think I'm being taken over. And honestly, I'm not sure how I feel about this. Proud, shocked, a little resentful maybe. James nodded, reading the subtle conflict in her body language. I expected that, and I don't want you to feel overshadowed. Operational control remains yours. This is about partnership, not dominance. He leaned forward, intensity in his gaze. Think of it as a safety net, a way to ensure your dreams have room to grow while carrying my experience with you. Emma sank into her chair, the words sinking in, mixing with her pride, her incredulity, and a tiny spark of amusement. So, let me get this straight. You're buying my company because you didn't want to retire quietly. Exactly, James replied, a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. I wanted to do something unexpected, something that shakes both our worlds and maybe teaches us a few things about courage, trust, and family. Emma shook her head, half laughing, half exasperated. You're impossible, you know that. Only you would turn a retirement suggestion into this. She gestured at the folder. But I have to admit it's kind of brilliant and terrifying. Terrifying is part of growth, James said softly, a quiet, heartfelt edge to his voice. You've built something remarkable, Emma. I'm not here to take that away. I'm here to strengthen it and perhaps show you that audacity has its place even at 62. The room fell into a reflective silence. Papers rustled, pens clicked against notebooks, and the city beyond the windows carried on, oblivious to the private upheaval inside. Emma's gaze softened, pride and conflicted affection mingling. I don't know if I can accept this, she murmured, but I also kind of want to. James leaned back, letting the tension stretch and fold in on itself. Take your time. I didn't come here to force anything. Just know this. Whatever you decide, my respect, my pride in you, and my admiration remain unchanged. This is an opportunity, one we can navigate together. A faint smile broke across Emma's face, tentative yet genuine. All right, Dad, let's see where this goes, but you better not try to run the day-to-day, she added, the hint of humor easing the remaining tension. Agreed, James replied, the corners of his eyes crinkling with amusement. You're still the captain, I'm just the unexpected first mate. For the first time that morning, the energy in the office shifted from shock and tension to possibility. The confrontation, initially poised between disbelief and subtle resentment, transformed into a moment of connection, pride, and a shared sense of audacious adventure. The path ahead was uncertain, but it gleamed with the promise of challenges, surprises, and a bond neither of them would ever forget. The first week after James Whittaker officially became the owner of Emma's company felt like stepping into a new world, one simultaneously familiar and foreign. Employees who once treated him as a distant, respected figure now glanced at him with guarded curiosity, unsure how to navigate this shift. The office hummed with tension, the usual rhythm punctuated by whispers and sideways glances. Every decision James made was scrutinized. Every suggestion he offered carried the invisible weight of familial authority. Emma, for her part, was caught between pride and frustration. She wanted to honor her father's experience, yet her instincts screamed against interference. In the first board meeting post-acquisition, James presented a proposal to expand client outreach, an idea he had honed from decades of navigating corporate growth. The room was silent, every executive eyes fixed on him, waiting for Emma's reaction. Dad, I appreciate the strategy, but our team's bandwidth is stretched, Emma said firmly, her voice calm but tinged with tension. We can't just implement a large-scale expansion without assessing risk thoroughly. Her gaze locked with his, a mixture of challenge and familiarity. James nodded, absorbing her caution. I understand, Emma, but sometimes calculated risk is necessary to achieve meaningful growth. We can start small, pilot the project, and scale gradually. His tone was patient, authoritative, yet never dismissive. Emma leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. Small steps, yes, but I need to make sure our culture and vision aren't compromised. I built this company on trust and innovation, not just numbers. The tension crackled between them, a subtle battle of experience versus ambition, strategy versus vision. James recognized the same fire in her that had propelled him through his early years of relentless work, yet the very quality that made her exceptional also made compromise difficult. He let the silence linger, allowing both their thoughts to settle before adding, "I admire that, Emma, I really do. My goal isn't to take over your vision, it's to support it, even if that support feels disruptive at times." Outside the boardroom, private moments brought their own set of emotional challenges. James often found himself wandering the quiet halls late at night, imagining the company as a living organism, one that now included both his and Emma's ambitions. He pictured her working late at her desk, her eyes scanning reports with the same intensity he had once applied. He knew she felt the weight of his presence, both as a father and as a new owner. The thought tightened his chest. He had entered her world boldly, but had he overstepped? Emma, in her apartment overlooking the city, stared at the same skyline her father had admired for years. Pride battled frustration in her chest. She wanted to embrace the opportunity, to acknowledge the wisdom he brought, yet she resented the disruption to the rhythm she had fought to establish. The emotional strain made her feel caught between admiration and rebellion. Was it possible to honor both her father and herself? The question gnawed at her through sleepless nights, mirroring the tension that now rippled through the office. One afternoon, during a client pitch, the strain reached a subtle breaking point. James suggested a bold new partnership mid-meeting, thinking it a natural progression. Emma interjected, pointing out potential conflicts, operational bottlenecks, and financial risk. The room froze as their differing approaches collided, not in anger, but in a tense, high-stakes dance of intellect and emotion. Afterward, James retreated to his corner office, the city sprawling below like a maze of challenges and possibilities. He reflected on the confrontation, recognizing the delicate balance required, guiding without overshadowing, advising without dominating. The moral tension weighed heavily. Could he assert his authority while honoring her autonomy? Could his experience coexist with her ambition without tipping into control? Emma, meanwhile, walked the office corridors, observing employees who now looked to both of them with wary anticipation. The dual leadership created uncertainty, and she felt responsible not only for the company's success, but for maintaining trust and morale. She paused by the conference room windows, letting the late afternoon sun bathe her in golden light, seeking clarity amidst the swirling emotions. In private moments, father and daughter occasionally shared brief, quiet exchanges, coffee breaks, hallway nods, snippets of conversation that carried unspoken acknowledgement of the tension. Each interaction, small though it was, reinforced the complexity of their dynamic, a blend of love, respect, rivalry, and mutual dependence. Cinematic in its subtlety, these moments hinted at the deepening emotional narrative, the moral stakes, and the suspense of whether they could navigate this new reality without fracture. By the end of the week, both had learned that adjustment was a negotiation of hearts as much as minds. Tension remained, but it was tempered with recognition of shared goals and the cinematic rhythm of office life. Emails pinging, phones ringing, footsteps echoing in polished halls continued to underscore the delicate interplay of authority, family, and ambition. The rising conflict, though unresolved, had set the stage for moments of reflection, reckoning, and eventual resolution. The tension that had simmered beneath the surface finally erupted one rainy Thursday afternoon. Emma sat in her office, staring at the financial reports scattered across her desk, her fingers drumming a staccato rhythm that matched the storm outside. The acquisition, once thrilling and full of possibility, now felt like a shadow stretching over every decision she made. Every time she suggested a new strategy, James's calm but firm voice overrode her, unintentionally reminding her that the company she had built was now under his ownership. Pride wrestled with frustration, creating a gnawing sense of inadequacy she couldn't shake. "Emma, we should consider restructuring the client outreach for Q3, James said gently, yet his tone carried the quiet authority he had honed over decades. Emma's lips pressed into a thin line. "I've already accounted for that," she said, her voice sharper than intended. "I think the current strategy aligns better with our team's capacity." James paused, sensing the undercurrent of tension. He had meant to support, not to dominate. Yet even as he nodded and said, "Understood," a shadow of doubt crept into his chest. Had he misjudged the impact of his involvement? Was his desire to participate inadvertently suffocating the very initiative he had hoped to nurture? Later, alone in his office, James stared at the rain streaking the windows. His mind replayed interactions from the past week, the subtle eye rolls, the withheld opinions, the moments of hesitation he had caught in Emma's expressions. Each incident, though minor, now loomed large. The fear that he had overstepped, that his bold gesture might have fractured the fragile balance between father and daughter, gnawed at him relentlessly. He had thought audacity would inspire. Instead, he questioned whether it had alienated. Emma, meanwhile, wandered the hallways, avoiding eye contact with staff, avoiding even glances at her father. She felt trapped in a web of expectation, responsibility, and familial dynamics she had never anticipated. The company that once symbolized independence and personal achievement now felt like a stage where she had to perform under the shadow of her father's legacy. Every decision carried emotional weight far beyond financial outcomes. Every suggestion from James felt simultaneously like mentorship and a subtle reminder of her supposed inexperience. By evening, the emotional strain became almost tangible. James poured himself a drink, the amber liquid catching the dim glow of his office lamp. He reflected on the journey from his own youth, years of meticulous effort, long nights, and sacrifices made in the name of ambition. Could he have acted differently? Could he have allowed Emma more space, more autonomy, without inserting himself so forcefully? The questions were heavy, gnawing at him like an unrelenting tide. Emma retreated to her apartment, the city's neon lights blurred by rain streaks on the window. Her mind replayed the tension of the day, the subtle dismissals, the moments when her voice had been tempered by the presence of her father. She felt a quiet ache, a blend of disappointment, worry, and reluctant admiration. Her father's intentions were pure, yet the execution had left her unsure where she stood, both in the company and in their relationship. The duality of pride and resentment tore at her quietly, an internal storm mirroring the one outside. James, sitting alone in the quiet of his office, realized that this was more than a business challenge. It was a moral and emotional crucible. Could he balance love and authority? Could he assert experience without diminishing her independence? The stakes had shifted. This was no longer simply a question of corporate growth, but of family, trust, and respect. The possibility of fracturing their relationship weighed as heavily as any financial misstep. Later, Emma sent a terse email requesting a private meeting. The formality of it, unusual for her, struck James with the gravity of the situation. He read the message twice, feeling a mixture of anticipation and dread. Their confrontation would be a test of patience, communication, and understanding. Could they navigate this low point without damage? Could reconciliation emerge from the emotional wreckage? That night, both parent and daughter lay awake in separate spaces, each reflecting on their own failures and fears, yet both harboring the faint hope that resolution was possible. James thought of audacity tempered with care, of actions taken with love but interpreted differently, of lessons about humility and trust that only the crucible of emotional strain could teach. Emma thought of pride, forgiveness, and the bond they shared, recognizing that even in tension, their connection remained unbroken. The storm outside subsided, leaving behind quiet streets slick with rain and a fragile sense of clarity. The crisis, though heavy and painful, had illuminated the challenges they faced and hinted at the path forward, a path that required honesty, compromise, and the courage to embrace vulnerability. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds of Emma's office, scattering gold across the polished floor. James arrived quietly, his briefcase in hand, but there was no edge to his steps, no authority to assert, no lesson to impose. Today, he came as a father, stripped of bravado, ready to bridge the distance that had grown between them. Emma looked up from her desk, a hint of tension lingering in her posture. She had expected a lecture, perhaps a defensive justification, but James simply smiled, a softness in his eyes that disarmed her. "Emma," he began, "I want to talk, really talk. No spreadsheets, no projections, just us." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, just talk." He pulled up a chair and sat across from her, hands clasped. "I realize I may have overstepped," he admitted. "My intentions were pure. I wanted to support, not overshadow, but I see now how my presence may have felt like intrusion." Emma's shoulders relaxed slightly. She had feared confrontation, yet his words carried humility, not arrogance. "I guess I was frustrated," she confessed. "This company has always been mine. Every risk, every victory, every late night, it's all me. And suddenly, it felt like I was sharing something that I wasn't ready to." James nodded slowly, absorbing the honesty in her voice. "I understand, and I'm proud of everything you've built. My boldness may have cast a shadow, but it was never meant to dim your light. I see that now." His eyes softened, glinting with the vulnerability of a man willing to admit mistakes. Emma hesitated, then a small, tentative smile broke through. "I didn't realize how much I needed your guidance until I thought I didn't need it. I suppose we both assumed the worst, that one of us would be diminished by this arrangement." James's gaze softened further. "Perhaps, but that assumption was wrong. We're not opposing forces, Emma, we're collaborators, and in truth, I've learned as much from watching you run this company as you may have learned from me." The conversation unfolded like a delicate dance, alternating between confession and reflection, pride and humility. Memories surfaced, Emma's first pitch to a client, nervously trembling but confident, and James recalling his own early days of uncertainty and triumph. Laughter broke through at shared recollections. The time Emma had insisted on redecorating his office, turning it into a pastel nightmare, or the night he had tried to teach her finance basics, only to have her outwit him with a question he couldn't answer. These moments softened the remaining tension, creating a bridge of connection neither had realized they were missing. Emma leaned back, the warmth of understanding spreading. "I guess we've been testing each other, haven't we?" she said, a trace of humor in her voice, "trying to see if we could survive this change without tearing everything apart." James chuckled softly. "Yes, and it seems we have survived, maybe even thrived in our own way. The important thing is, we both want the same outcome, the success of this company and the strength of our relationship." He reached across the desk, a subtle gesture that carried weight far beyond the physical contact. Emma accepted the handshake, then let her hand rest lightly over his. It was a symbolic act, an unspoken acknowledgement that trust was being rebuilt. In that moment, the office transformed from a battleground of control and pride into a shared space of collaboration and mutual respect. The city beyond the windows seemed brighter somehow, the morning light refracting through glass and steel, casting long beams of hope and possibility. The emotional tension, once thick and suffocating, lifted incrementally with each honest word, each admitted fear, each gesture of understanding. James realized that reconciliation wasn't a single act, but a series of intentional choices, threaded together by vulnerability and patience. Emma's smile widened. "I think we can make this work," she said, "together." James nodded, the weight in his chest easing. "Together," he echoed, and in that simple word, the promise of renewed connection, respect, and partnership solidified. It was a turning point, not the end of conflict, but the beginning of a new chapter, one defined not by control or pride, but by love, trust, and shared purpose. They lingered for a moment, silent, absorbing the significance of the reconciliation. In that quiet, cinematic pause, both father and daughter sensed that while challenges would arise, the foundation of their relationship had been strengthened. Light had broken through tension, laughter had softened strain, and the symbolic gestures of trust and openness had cemented a path forward. The storm of the past week, with its misunderstandings and emotional lows, had created fertile ground for growth. James and Emma both knew the journey ahead would require constant negotiation, patience, and empathy. But now, armed with honesty and mutual respect, they were ready to face it together. Weeks had passed since the initial tension, and Whittaker Solutions had begun to breathe with a new rhythm. The office, once a minefield of unspoken grievances and awkward glances, now carried a quiet energy of collaboration and mutual respect. Emma and James moved through the halls with a synchronicity born of understanding. Their interactions were no longer tests of authority, but moments of shared ambition. Employees noticed it immediately, the daughter's innovative spark complemented by the father's seasoned perspective, a combination that turned challenges into opportunities. In the boardroom, the dynamic had shifted. Emma presented a bold strategy for client expansion, her confidence undiminished, while James offered insight, not direction. "That's an impressive projection, Emma," he remarked, genuinely admiring her vision. "Have you considered potential bottlenecks in Q4? Minor adjustments could increase efficiency without sacrificing creativity." Emma smiled, appreciating the subtlety of his guidance. It was no longer a power struggle, but a dialogue, a merging of experience and innovation. Evenings brought quieter reflections. James would linger at his office window, watching the city lights flicker against the darkening skyline. He thought of the audacity that had driven him to buy Emma's company, the doubts and emotional lows, and the eventual reconciliation. He realized that the risk had been worth it, not for control or recognition, but for connection, for legacy, for love. Lessons crystallized in his mind. Pride was natural, but humility strengthened bonds. Experience was valuable, but only when tempered with empathy. Audacity could inspire, but only when guided by understanding. At home, the transformation was equally evident. Dinner conversations were animated but relaxed, filled with laughter and occasional debates over ideas or news, each punctuated by mutual respect. James found himself savoring moments he had once taken for granted. The way Emma's eyes lit up when recounting successes, the subtle gestures of appreciation, the shared smiles across the table. Retirement, once a distant thought, now appeared as a backdrop to a richer life, one where family and work coexisted in harmony, each enriching the other. One evening, as they walked through the city park near their apartment, James glanced at Emma, the crisp autumn air rustling leaves around them. "I'm proud of you," he said softly, "not because you needed my help, but because you've embraced it and made it your own. You've grown stronger, and so have I." Emma paused, studying her father's thoughtful expression. "And I'm proud of you, Dad," she replied, "not just for the company, but for stepping into my world, for trusting me, and for showing me that bold choices can come from love, not just ambition." Their words hung in the air, a cinematic punctuation to the journey they had shared, a moment both intimate and universal, filled with the kind of resonance that lingers long after the scene ends. Back in the office the following week, James looked around at the team, Emma confidently directing discussions, employees engaged and motivated, the office humming with productive energy. He reflected on how far they had come, not just professionally but emotionally. The trust between father and daughter radiated, influencing every interaction, every decision. The company had not only survived the transition but had thrived, strengthened by a foundation of respect, communication, and shared vision. As he returned to his office, James paused by the window, gazing at the horizon. The sun dipped below the skyline, casting warm golden light across the city, a reminder that every ending is also a beginning. He understood now that legacy was not defined solely by wealth or achievement, but by the depth of connection and the courage to act boldly, guided by empathy and love. In that quiet, cinematic moment, father and daughter, separated by glass and distance yet united in purpose, carried the weight of their shared journey. They had learned that reconciliation and growth are neither instantaneous nor effortless, but the rewards, trust, mutual respect, and the joy of shared ambition were worth every trial. James sat alone in his study, the soft hum of the city outside mingling with the quiet ticking of the grandfather clock. A cup of untouched coffee steamed gently beside him, forgotten in the swirl of reflection. The events of the past months played across his mind like a cinematic reel, the casual suggestion from Emma that he retire, the spark of audacity that led him to buy her company, the sleepless nights filled with doubt and imagination, the confrontations, and finally, the reconciliation that had restored their bond. Each moment was vivid, each emotion raw and instructive. He thought about the risks he had taken, not financial risks alone, but emotional ones. Buying Emma's company had felt bold, almost reckless, yet it had revealed layers of understanding between them neither had anticipated. Pride had clashed with humility, authority with respect, but in the tension, a new rhythm had emerged. It wasn't about proving power or control, it was about connection, legacy, and the courage to act with both heart and mind. James allowed himself a smile, recalling moments of laughter with Emma in the office and at home. Those late evenings where they had shared memories, where old frustrations had been aired and forgiven, now felt like milestones. He realized that ambition without empathy was hollow, and guidance without listening could fracture relationships. True success, he now understood, wasn't measured in profits or accolades. It was measured in trust, love, and the ability to support someone while honoring their independence. He remembered the pivotal morning of reconciliation, the subtle gestures, the candid words, the pause that had signified mutual understanding. That day had been more than a breakthrough in business, it had been a breakthrough in life. James realized that every misunderstanding, every emotional low, had been a stepping stone toward a richer, more meaningful connection. He had learned that embracing change, rather than resisting it, often leads to unexpected joy and growth. Gazing out the window at the city lights flickering against the night, James reflected on the balance he had finally found between work and family. Retirement, once a distant and abstract concept, now seemed less like an end and more like a transition, a chance to enjoy the fruits of his labor alongside those he loved. Emma's laughter, her insights, her unwavering drive had reminded him that mentoring, guiding, and trusting the next generation was itself a profound legacy. In a quiet, cinematic moment, James picked up a pen and began jotting notes for the next strategy meeting, not with pressure or dominance, but with collaborative intent. The lessons of the past months, humility, patience, empathy, audacity, were etched into every choice he made. The office, the company, and most importantly, his relationship with Emma now reflected a harmony he had once feared impossible. He leaned back, letting the warmth of satisfaction and introspection wash over him. Success, he mused, was no longer a tally of achievements or a list of accolades. It was the subtle joy of watching someone you love grow, the courage to act boldly with kindness, and the peace that comes from understanding that life's richest rewards are found not in power or control, but in connection and shared purpose. The journey had been unexpected, the highs exhilarating, the lows humbling, but in the end, it had revealed a truth he would carry forever. Family, when approached with empathy, respect, and courage, is the most enduring legacy of all. And in that knowledge, James found a profound warmth and quiet satisfaction, a story of ambition tempered by love, ready to inspire both reflection and hope in all who heard it.